Good morning, Wickenburg, and welcome back to the 39th Annual Wickenburg Bluegrass Festival. How many here for the first time this morning? Not here yesterday. It's the first time this morning. How many fresh this morning? We had some because I was talking. Hello, Annie Beach. How you are? Well, we're going to get underway here this morning with a real treat. Fella I met probably 4, 5, 6 years ago, something over at Payson. We have Mr. Wyatt Troxel with us this morning to open this show, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Troxel.
We're not on. There we go.
There you go.
He was smart to leave that microphone off. You never know what might come out here. It's really a pleasure to be here this morning. And this is actually the fault of both John and Billy Breen, who caught me playing the National Anthem one day and asked if I could play at a variety of festivals that have been around, and I'm honored to be here to play for you. And before I play, I'd like to provide a little history, because a lot of people don't know the history of our national anthem. Yeah, please feel free to sit down. This could get long and boring. About 204 years ago, towards the end of the War of 1812, the British laid siege to a fort in Maryland with the intent to invade and reconquer the United States. And it was a war over taxes. It was called Madison's War, War of 1812. The British fleet, who is fresh out of the Napoleonic War, came into the harbor with all of the entire fleet. And there were 5 forts along the river there leading up to Baltimore, and Fort McHenry was the first. And Fort McHenry is still there. And the commandant of the fort had 2 flags made. And one was what they call the garrison flag, and then the other was one we now call the Star-Spangled Banner, which up until just a few years ago was the largest American flag ever made, until somebody put one over a 7-Eleven in Phoenix. He knew the British were coming, and so he had the flag commissioned and made to be raised. Anyway, long story short, the British began laying siege to Fort McHenry. They also sent in 5,000 ground troops to go over the walls, go over the ramparts. Those folks were stopped by the Minutemen in the forest, and not a one made it through. The British had mortars and rockets. They were called, the Cosgrave rockets that they had perfected somewhat in the Napoleonic War. They were freighted in on barges within 3,000 yards of the fort and set off. Fortunately, either by bad arithmetic or divine intervention, all the fuses were short, and they exploded above the fort and never in the fort. So you hear the phrase, with the rockets' red glare, bombs bursting in air. That was Francis Scott Key seeing that bombardment occur all night long, 24 hours. And he penned the first stanza of the song, the poem at the time, watching that. And then he wrote the rest of the poem later when he was released. He honestly believed we had lost because of the intensity of the bombardment, until about 4:30 in the morning, and the major had the Star-Spangled Banner raised through the din and the dust and the dirt in the air, and Francis Scott Key and the commandant on the ship could see it from 8 miles away. The British knew they had not beaten us. We had triumphed. We did not lose one soul in that bombardment. The British had exhausted all of their munitions. So they dropped sail, battened up the hatches, and left. And that was the beginning of the end of the War of 1812. And then Andrew Jackson took care of the rest of it down in New Orleans. So in crafting this arrangement, I try to reflect on Francis Scott Key's initial emotion that we had lost. And the first stanza we sing is not a stanza of triumph. It's a question of, did we survive? So when you think of, oh, say, can you see? He's looking out there. Can you see anything? Are we still there? And then by the end of the song, it's a song of triumph, which we never get that far. So I will play through this twice. First time is the song or the passage of question, and then the last one is the passage of triumph. So if you would all please stand, and men, please remove your hats. God bless America. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Troxel. If I've ever heard a prettier rendition, I don't know where. That's beautiful. And thank you for the history lesson, too. I think too often we forget the foundations and the roots that allow us to have the freedoms that we have. Just to be able to assemble like this, and all the freedoms we have in this country that can so easily be taken for granted. One of the neat things about this music is that it records a lot of that, and hopefully reminds the young people and the ones coming up who listen to it, take time and don't take it for granted.